Hey everyone, you'll hear this at the end of the episode as well, but just wanted to give you a heads up that the gentlemen visiting us today from the review course have added a coupon code for all our listeners. Just use the code GenerEhlist, GenerEhlist, when registering for the review course for 2024 in the spring or the summer, and you'll get $100 off. Thanks. Oh, hi everybody. This is the GenerEhlist yet again, CCFP Exam Topics Podcast, and I'm flattered and overwhelmed by the fact that we've got the two gentlemen creators of the review course, Dr. Simon Moore and Dr. Paul Dhillon, back again. I'm not going to belabor their introductions because we did them last time and the credentials are way too long, so we'll forego that, but just know that they're amazing human beings. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you so much for having us. It is absolutely a pleasure to be back here once again with a whole bunch of brand new tips, tricks, and strategies for the review course.
Yeah, it's great to be back. We've had people just going through the exam, and it was interesting how these new updates came out. So really excited to talk about them today because some of them could really make a difference on the exam.
You guys are like my foil from an energy perspective, so this is good. Everyone will be glad. All right, so we've got a few questions that we'd like to dig into to get updates, and we might go back as well and just review some of the big high yield stuff from the first episode. But just know you can go back to episode 58 or just go to the website and search exam tips, and you'll find that previous episode as well. If you listen to these back to back when you're prepping, you're going to be ace. All right? All right, guys, let's talk about the candidate document itself. So like administrative stuff that people need to worry about. Are there new changes? Are there things that people need to start stressing about on top of everything else?
So very quietly, the CCFP updated their list of things that you must know for the exam. We're talking about the instructions to the candidate document.
And so you'd think for something big like this, which is going to make, it's going to have an actual impact on what you write on the exam, what your mark is, they would have told everyone about it.
Especially with the major changes that they made. They made so many changes. There's several new line items. What is it? 6 new line items?
There's 6 new. So there's a total of 15 things. It's gone up. It used to be like 9 or 10, but now you're up at 15 things you got to know. And it's important early on when you're an R1 to know this because you can use it when you're seeing a patient, writing up your management plan. Just write in not real life. Just pretend you're at the CFPC hospital is what we say at the review course. It's not real life, but you got to know these 15 things. Use them for your 2 years as you get to your residency exam.
Love it. So one of the things that often comes up is people are studying. The keeners have been at it for 18 months. And then a new guideline comes out like a week before the examination. When people want to know, when do they have to start caring about these things?
Right away. I think day one. That's the message, is start day one and use it throughout. And if they make more changes, I think you just got to keep an eye. A great way to do that is we have a Facebook group where we have people that have done the exam, can chat to other people. And that's where we hear about a lot of these things, because the second one person hears about it, bang, everyone across the country can know about it and get that experience from hundreds, maybe thousands now, of people who've done the exam.
Yeah, so in general, if a new guideline comes out up to December, then it's fair game for the exam in the spring. And then fall exam, which is going to be in October, if it comes out a few months ahead of that, so about 5 or 6 months ahead of that, then it's fair game for that exam. But you're right, this just happened this year. So a brand new lipid screening guideline came out, and it came out literally the day before the SAMPs.
Yeah, so am I going to get punished for being right up to date and using a brand new peer guideline? Really nice guideline. Really good. But am I going to get penalized if I'm more up to date than the exam?
Yeah, and so the CCFP has got a specific line on their website. It says you will not be penalized for staying current.
Real life example, what did I do when I did my CCFP EM exam? I found questions that I knew. I'd read the article. I actually even probably remembered half of the reference in the year. And I actually wrote down the up-to-date answer and I put in little brackets afterwards. For example, say you use this peer lipid update, I'd write that down in brackets afterwards. So you're not going to get marked wrong for being more up to date than the exam. And that's a real issue that could come up.
The other angle on this is that what if there are conflicting guidelines, not just a new one came out, but what if, for example, let's do this example from the Peer Simplified Lipid Guidelines from 2023. They came out in October 2023, and they do conflict in many lines with the CCS, Canadian Cardiovascular Society Lipid Screening Guidelines. So how do we navigate that?
I think this is where you get that reasonable test. So what would a reasonable family physician in Canada do? And you're not going to get marked wrong if you're being reasonable and using one of those guidelines.
And remember, the exam is marked by family physicians. They're aware that there's conflicting guidelines with prostate screening. They're aware that there's conflicting guidelines with lipid screening. So if you say, I'm not going to order an ApoB or I'm not going to treat to target because the newest peer simplified guideline says that, your exam markers, thank goodness, are aware of these conflicts.
Yeah, it's going to be a group of peers sitting around that are going to hopefully sit and look and maybe decide not to put in questions that are going to be so vague, but they probably will. But they're going to sit around and they're going to go over any of the questions that are marked wrong. And that's our understanding, that they'll actually look at it and you're not going to lose a mark for that.
This sort of came up before in our previous episode as well, but home or testing site, if I get a chance to take it at home, should I do it or should I put all the onus on them for having their equipment ready for us?
We've gotten some horror stories about exam software glitches from people who wrote it at home and people who wrote at Prometric sites.
Yeah,
so there's no good answer, unfortunately.
No good answer. And I think a little bit becomes your own travel circumstances, the strength of your internet connection, having a backup internet connection. But like Simon said, we've heard pluses and minuses on both sides. Someone just emailed us yesterday about they've been delayed by 2 days. So they've had to rewrite the exam. And I can't imagine the stress those people are going through. So if you've got a good spot, good backup internet connection, some people recommend having a second laptop ready, then you know what, do it at home.
Yeah, I like to be aware of like what could go wrong. So I like to know what the horror stories are so that I'm not surprised on exam day. So if you go to the reviewcourse.com/exam essentials, that's our one-stop shop. We've got a Facebook group there. There's thousands of people there who have written posts about what happened on exam day. And wasn't there one, they ended up needing a backup laptop?
And then the backup laptop went as well, didn't it? And they had to go to their neighbor's house to get a third laptop.
So it's really useful to know what there is that's happened before at a Prometric site, what's happened before when you write at home. And if you go on the Facebook group, there's a really thorough discussion of the glitches that can happen either way.
There is a phone number that you can write down for emergencies on the day. But I think mentally just being prepared to say, okay, you know what, there will be some sort of a backup. It may be either a delay on the day or you may write it another day. But I think the vast majority end up being okay, but we end up hearing about some of these kind of horror stories.
We totally get it. We were just speaking to all the residents in Manitoba, and some of them are rural residents, and they just don't have the option to go to a Prometric testing site. So our heart goes out to those folks.
Are the consequences from what you've heard similar? Like if my internet or laptop blows up when I'm at home versus if their computer and internet blows up at a testing site?
Ooh, I think they're just trying to get you in somehow to get it done.
Okay, so it seems equivalent. If it goes wrong, and they'll find a way. We've got the next one here, a kid's book. Why would I read a kid's book?
Because you can study with your kids. You can be spending quality time with your kids. Between Simon and I, we have 5 kids now? 5,
exactly.
6?
Not like
5.
with separate. We're
separate with like people, with my wife and your wife, separate kids. But this was an idea. It was Simon's idea. Why don't you tell me, when did you first come up with this?
Well, you know, when you're like trying to get that work-life balance and you want to spend more time with your kids, but you also have other demands. And so my heart went out to all the residents who were trying to study for the exam, but also have kids and want to spend time with them. And I realized, you know, there actually could be a way that you can study for the exam while spending time with your kids.
Yeah, and that was this book. So it's got milestones for kids. It's got all of the review course study tips and tricks built into it. So you're reading a story to your kids about being a resident and becoming a family doctor, and you're studying at the same time. And the book is so boring, it's going to put the kids to sleep.
Thanks a lot, Paul. I appreciate that. I'll give you some examples though. Like in one page, there's a nice rhyming story about moving, as a lot of residents have to do. And if you look in the moving truck, there's antlers. And so that makes you suspect maybe there are guns in the home, which is a safety issue. Another example, a kid who's pre-ambulatory, but they've got a broken leg, and you've got to think about non-accidental injury. And all of those tips and tricks are in the appendix so that you can use them to study for your exam.
We've given this out to residents, I think at the Society of Rural Physicians meeting, to the Manitoba residents, and people love it.
That's amazing. The innovation's cool. And anything that throws milestones another direction into my brain is welcome as a guy with no kids.
The easiest way to learn all the milestones I found is to just have kids. So
have kids.
Go get some kids.
Yeah, repetition.
Watch them grow.
Yeah, I've heard it's cheap. It doesn't take much of your time, so that I should get on that.
Yeah, we've had the same experience.
All right, so here's a term I didn't specifically know, but CCFP exam silver medalists, which, as I'm learning from you, is the award for the top mark in Canada. Any pearls? What do these people do?
So I'll never forget, we were at the Family Medicine Forum conference. We've got a booth there every year. So come say hi if you're there in November in Montreal. And someone walked up to us and said, I took your course and I got the silver medal for top CCFP exam mark in Canada.
And then so I asked, well, who gets the gold medal?
There is no gold medal. I guess the
price
CFP
of gold is too high.
CEO gets the gold medal. Or president or whatever. So we actually asked them, and with their permission, we got all these details on our website. How did you study and what did you do to get the top mark on the exam?
And I think the lessons that we got from that, because there are like kind of two groups that go through. There's the kind of the residency trained, and then there's all those practice eligible candidates. And the pearl from the one doctor that year is she said, take a month off to just mentally get yourself prepared for the exam, especially if you're a practice eligible candidate, because it's a different mindset than being in residency.
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing to have the luxury to do that. I know that's not a reality for a lot of people. One of the doctors told us that they used Toronto Notes as a reference. They used the Red Book. They studied CFP journals. They studied CMAJ. So that's why every month we summarize the CFP journal into a podcast form. I would say CFP Distilled is probably the best family medicine related podcast in Canada. Wouldn't you agree, Caleb?
I think so. Caleb, what do you think
I
about
have no
that?
strong opinions.
Okay, second best.
But probably second best.
second best.
It's silver medal.
Yeah.
Silver medal.
I'll take the silver medal.
Yeah, exactly.
Silver medal's first place.
Exactly.
Thanks, Caleb.
It's such like a mental gymnastics. But you got the silver. Silver is best. Truth is falsehood. We also did a survey of all the residents at the review course and asked them what resources did you use as well. So we've actually updated our website. Again, thereviewcourse.com/exam essentials. It's all free. It's publicly available. You can go to that website and get all that information.
I think that's a huge value for people, because people always say like, okay, what's the one resource? What's the like unbiased best book to read to study? And so we've redone and kind of refreshed our research from a few years ago, looked at all the different SAMP resources, our course, our textbook, the Daniel 2 Family Medicine Notes, and you get that real honest year-to-year update of like, what is the best book? Is this worth my money or not? Which is a huge concern when you're a resident.
Yeah, and then how do you get the silver medal for top mark for SOOs? In one word, practice.
Yeah, practice. And the Facebook group is great for that. Again, if you're in a rural, remote area or you can't find someone, put a note up in the Facebook group.
And we're going to review your guys' SOO approach as well. That's going to get you to that silver medal as well. All right, so we're going to go back. You guys can look at episode 58 that we did the initial exam tips, but we're going to have a quick review of some of the high yield stuff because it's worth it. Oxygen, medication, or treatment, or something else.
Oxygen and IV fluids, we'll add that in. So that's new in the update. So oxygen and IV fluids are treatment or management options. So those are the words you're going to look for in the SAMP question stem when it's going to ask you what are your treatment or management options. What we recommend to people is expect and study 10 things. Expect the top few things to be taken away and already done in the question. That's why you got to know that depth. You got to know that 10 deep, and then you're going to talk about your medication or treatment. So they're not considered medication. So oxygen, not a medication. IV fluids, not a medication. What was the one that came up in our Facebook group, Simon? The vaccines.
The vaccines, yeah. Somebody was asking if I'm giving MMR vaccine, is that one answer per line, or is that, do I write MMR on one line? And the CPC doesn't give us guidance on this. So what were the answers there?
So I think there I would go back to what they said about CPR. And we talked about this for years. You can't write CPR because everyone was saying like, what's your next step in management? You got your crashing patient. Maybe it is CPR. And it's part of that package that happens in an emergency department right away. But you've got to list one answer per line. So if I had that question, number one, I'd say, even though they haven't said it yet, they're going to say vaccines are not drugs. It's going to be a treatment or management option. And once again, they're very clear on this one answer per line. So I would almost separate it out.
All right, this is a big one. It was in the previous one. I think it's worth talking about. For me, it's like a hallmark of the review course, and it saved my butt when I was writing as well. So Snowflake, how do I spell it funny enough that it's going to help me?
How did two guys from British Columbia teach the rest of Canada about snow?
About snow, exactly, yeah. So the Snowflake mnemonic, this was invented when I was an OSCE examiner, and I saw people struggling because the exam said at 8 minutes the buzzer sounds, and the candidates had to answer the question, what is your management of this patient with heart failure? And it was so frustrating because everyone said Lasix. And I wanted to be like, there's like 7 more other answers or 12 more other answers on my answer sheet.
I know. More Lasix.
Yeah, exactly. So if I could have just prompted them and said, what about vaccination? Or what about something preventive? I'm sure that we could have gotten way more marks from way more people. So that's where this tool came from.
On the EM exam, the answer is more Lasix.
Yeah. But remember, at the exam, it's different. We're thinking about that broad biopsychosocial context for that patient, right? Why are they in heart failure now? What can I do to prevent future exacerbations of heart failure? Thinking about that vaccination and thinking about safety. Like Snowflake starts with S. And we teach at the review course, safety, safety, safety. There's going to be some sort of a safety consideration in all those patients. You gave your elderly patient Lasix for his heart failure, and now he fell on the way to the bathroom because he's having to pee more. So it's that downstream, upstream thinking about urination.
So N is going to be for next visit because the mnemonic goes SNO PQRST, starts with SNO for snow. So N is for next visit. When are you going to have this patient back? You're doing a SOO exam. You cannot touch your patients on a SOO exam. I hope you don't. Do you have to book a physical exam? The answer is yes. Definitely tell them we're going to have you back. Going to invite back other people that you mentioned and do a comprehensive visit.
The next thing is what more can you offer to the patient? And it's offering management potentially, it's offering social supports, and then you can get into the vaccinations and stuff as well. So what more can you offer to this patient? And you got to think very broadly, stuff that might happen with associated kind of healthcare providers or support. So the nurses might do that in your residence center. At the exam, you've got to be writing those things down. And the biggest thing is offer to be their family doctor.
Just like in real life.
Just like in real life.
So moving down the mnemonic, P is for prevention. And that's all those like, how could we have prevented this exacerbation? How can we prevent COVID or influenza? So vaccination and those lifestyle modifications, checking daily weights, for example.
R is the next one, and that's for refer. And what we teach at the review course is you got to be prepared to refer just a tiny bit earlier. In real life longitudinal practice, you might see the patient, say, you know what, I'll see you again next week, and then we'll decide if we're going to refer. But you need to illustrate to the examiners you're thinking about that next step. In the SOO environment, it's all about, you know what, here's what we're going to try in your last 3 minutes of management, and if that doesn't work, I'm going to refer you. It's just a signal to the examiners and on the SAMP exam that you're thinking ahead.
Exactly. I don't know where you learned your alphabet. I think Q comes before R.
I quit the alphabet.
You quit
to R.
moving through the mnemonic in order. Q is for quit the bad stuff. And that's for that lung cancer patient on your SOOs that you need to remember to tell them, I suggest you quit smoking. Can I offer you help with that?
And there's evidence for it. People actually do have extended lifespans, even after a diagnosis of lung cancer with quitting smoking. But it's you know what? You've been studying for 10 years and maybe you're going to forget to say quit smoking to a smoker on an exam. But we are here to remind you, you've still got to say it.
S is for start, starting medication, starting Lasix.
T is for teach. So anything that you've taught, you're going to offer some sort of an app. You're going to offer some sort of paper, a support group, something to teach them about it. If you're sending someone home with a puffer, you're going to say the pharmacist is going to teach you how to use that.
So that really rounds it out. SNO PQRST. It's a lot, but in 3 minutes, you can rattle through it. Your examiner's not going to be interrupting you. And it's just going to give you that comprehensive outlook on how do I manage this patient? And over again, in looking in the old SOO exams on the CCFP's website, these topics, every single one of them comes up on old SOOs. So that's our 3-minute management Snowflake mnemonic.
I love it.
Thank you.
We talked last time about best ways to study and exam accommodation. Is there anything new this year compared to last year for either of those? So let's talk best ways to study.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything new. So last year, the advice was that when you are applying for the exam, that is when you ask for exam accommodation. Do you need more time because of a medical condition? Do you need a certain setup? Do you need a milk fridge if you are lactating? Because apparently these things aren't commonly accepted without a doctor's note, apparently.
Yeah, so that's the piece of advice is think forward when you're applying for the exam. The deadline comes up a few months before the exam. I believe it's 90 days or so.
Yeah, so you apply for the accommodation at the time of applying for the exam, and then you've got until, I think it's 6 weeks before the exam to get your paperwork in.
Get the paperwork in.
Okay, good. Let's go back then. We talked about 6 new line items in the candidate document. Are there big ones there, or if you want to fly through each of them?
Yeah.
To let us know what to be aware of?
Yeah, so the brand new one is drug screen is not allowed as an answer. We said that at the beginning. So the new version verbatim states, for example, CBC, electrolytes, drug screen, and arterial blood gases are not acceptable answers. So you've got to really parse them apart and say for CBC, is it the hemoglobin you're looking for? In electrolytes, is it actually sodium and potassium you're wondering about? In an ABG, is it PCO2 that you want? And in a drug screen, it's going to be for particular drugs. So I think if I was to work that into a SAMP, I'm going to be giving you some sort of a hint as to what drugs do I need to rule out. And always with drugs, be thinking about IV drug use from the street, or is it something that they're taking that's prescribed?
Exactly. Yeah. So again, this is for the SAMPs from the instructions to the candidate document. There's another one that actually came out this year. I like to think that it's probably from Paul's email to the CFPC saying, can we write CPR? And now CPR is not allowed. CFPC seems to have gone back to the 1920s ACLS protocol. Instead of it being the most important thing you can do in ACLS, the CFPC says no CPR
on
so
the exam.
What does that mean?
So what does that mean? It means that when you've got that crashing patient where you are thinking, man, this person needs CPR, well, you got to write down specific interventions. And this, I think the root cause of this used to be ABCs are your next step in management. And ABCs, you can't write that down on a single line. So what we've been telling people for years is you've got to break down that ABC to separate line items. So if they're putting this in the exam instructions to candidate, I'm going to say CPR is going to be done, and you're going to have to give specific airway instructions.
Yeah, so right in that document, it says specifically, the specific maneuvers should be listed if appropriate. For example, intubation, chest compressions, and defibrillation.
And that's a great hint there. So that tells you, well, chest compressions is the new CPR. Defibrillation, they are putting it in without any joules. I would probably hope that you know the joules by the time you're finished, but that just gives me an idea of the level that they want for that patient, where you're going to be giving airway, breathing, circulation instructions. And so if it's IV fluids, that's a treatment and management step, not a medication.
Yeah, and Caleb, that really goes back to one of the probably the biggest pieces of advice I can give for the SAMPs is whenever you're writing an answer for the SAMPs, think, is there another word that I can add to this answer that doesn't make the answer wrong? So if they're asking about doing some testing and you say, I'm going to order a glucose, well, sometimes it's going to make a huge difference if you're referring to serum glucose or CSF glucose or knee joint aspirate fluid glucose. So there's always another word you can add and be more specific. And in some cases, it's going to be the difference between getting the answer right or wrong, like with imaging.
With imaging, absolutely, Simon. That's where you've got to be thinking about how specific can I be. Writing ultrasound, and the question's all about, there was a soccer player that just fell and had his knee broken. I forget it. Neymar just had his knee broken up. And
then rolled 45 times afterwards.
Rolled 45 times. No one touched him, but you're going to get an MRI. Well, MRI of
no, that's wrong.
What?
On the CCFP exam, that's wrong. You got to say the body part.
Yeah, so MRI right knee, for example, of Neymar. Avoiding zebras. And it's not a veterinarian type thing, but it's avoiding zebras. So stay in your vehicle when on safari. Really important.
Yeah, no, they actually have a brand new line on this instructions to the candidate document. And it says, when providing a differential diagnosis, consider the more likely, important, or life-threatening diagnoses rather than potentially rare or unlikely conditions. So I think that really speaks to the breadth of the exam that you need to know. We need to know 105 topics, and we've come up with actually another 105 separate topics. We call the other 105 topics that we've come up with a list of. And turns out that they want you to know a little bit about all of them, but they don't want you to know in extreme depth for every single one. They don't want you to know the 9th line Parkinsonian medication, to use an example that Dr. Mike Curler uses.
Sure. And the life-threatening diagnosis, I think, is clear. You've got to know for whatever presentation, is there a deadly diagnosis in there? And when you're thinking and generating your differential, as you've read the questions first, then the SAMP stem, then the questions, which is a great way to strategize when you look at SAMPs, is think about what's going to kill this patient.
Exactly, yeah. So you might think that necrotizing fasciitis is a zebra, but you should be considering that because it is a life-threatening diagnosis. It's something we need to be aware of and rule out and at least think about when our patient comes in with, say, knee pain or rash.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. I think that's super common too, because we try and outsmart ourselves when we're writing the examination. We go, oh, maybe they want me to know about this genetic abnormality, and then it ends up being acne or something. So that's a really good point. Nobody's trying to fool you. They just want you not to kill anyone.
Yeah, exactly. That facial rash is not
That's the goal. Remember, top mark is only silver. So the bar is don't kill anyone during your exam.
All right, guys. What else you got? Anything?
So this was an update that I actually appreciate, is lipid profile and culture and sensitivities are allowed as answers. Hugely progressive move to move the exam from artificiality to real life, to how we practice in real life. So I think that's great to know is lipid profile, culture, and sensitivities are allowed.
But I think there's a really key point. There's some gold in that answer. Sorry, there's some silver in that answer if you look in the document, because it specifically says the following 3 group tests are the only allowable exceptions on this examination. So if you want to write more than one answer per line, here are the only 3 that you can use. So the first one is urinalysis,
cultures and sensitivities,
and the third one is lipid profile.
Yeah, so those are the 3 to know. You talked about at the beginning, when do you need to start studying and using these? Start thinking about these as an R1.
Brilliant. Any more tips on studying in general? We sort of talked about CFP Journal, CMAD, stay up to date on the guidelines, listen to CFP Distilled and the Generalist. Anything else?
Yeah, new guidelines are always going to be where SAMP question markers and writers are going to write questions. We are going to go into a deep dive on basically the CCFP exam 101. For the first time ever this summer, we put together a R1 101 for the CCFP exam. And it was so popular that we're going to host that again in January.
Yeah, January 18th. And this is something, it's one of those things I look back and I'm like, I wish we had thought about this 5 years ago. But you know what? We didn't have COVID and this switch to being online and having webinars. So we've got a 3-part. Webinar 1 is going to be exam anatomy and resources. Then part 2, we're going to do in February on the 15th, which is going to go into SOOs. So a big deep dive into SOOs. People always have questions. Virtual SOOs. We got some screenshots of it. We got from the CFPC website. And then we kind of have that unique insight of people who have gone through and done it, who can tell you about some of the nuances to just excel.
And then the third one, we're going to focus on SAMP. So the dates of those, if you want to put them in your calendar, January 18th, 2024 for the R1 101. What is the exam anatomy basics?
And the next one is Thursday, February 15th on SOOs.
Day after Valentine's Day. So if you're looking for a gift for Valentine's Day, you can give somebody an invitation to our webinar.
I just swooned. How romantic.
And the third date for SAMPs.
SAMPs, Friday, March 15th, right before St. Patrick's Day, going a deep dive into SAMPs. And at that stage, people will be ready, but we just want to offer one more chance to get that nuances, make sure all these new updates are integrated into your study plan.
Day before St. Patrick's was a good call instead of,
day after. Yeah.
All right, gang. My brain is full. I'm hoping this has been a good bit of info for everybody. I'm sure it has been. I can't recommend the course enough as somebody who took it before and passed. We got links as well to everything that was mentioned here in the show notes. So that exam essentials page, as well as some of the subheadings within their website. Go check it out, scroll through. There's tons of blog posts. There's tons of free stuff. I don't know how you guys are not going broke with all the stuff you're offering for free, but kudos to you guys. And as you can tell from this episode and the last one, they're engaging as all get out, so you'll have a great day there.
Thanks, Caleb. I appreciate it. And we know money's tight when you're a resident. That's why we try and run everything break even. I think we can set up a coupon code. If you use the coupon GenerEhlist spelled correctly as it is on this podcast website, we'll give you a little bit more than the early bird rate, so we can give you $100 off.
By generalist, he means with the EH.
Exactly.
By spelled correctly,
the Canadian
he means
spelling.
With the EH. GenerEhlist. We'll put that in the show notes as well and throw it out on social media.
Yeah, that'll be good for our spring 2024 courses and our summer 2024 courses.
Amazing. Very much appreciate it. Listeners will appreciate it. Residents everywhere appreciate it. Dr. Simon Moore, Dr. Paul Dhillon, thank you again. You're amazing. Hopefully we'll see you next year.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Take care.